Welcome to episode 13 of the LAN Partners Podcast. My name is Connor, and with me this week is Matt.
Hello.
And Dave.
Hello.
So this is the first of the month, like we've been saying, so we got a nice little retro review. I will be reviewing StarTropics on the NES Classic. Dave's got a snipper of a review of Snipperclips. Then Matt just recently finished Nier Automata, so we're going to be talking about that game. Not a full review of it, just because I already reviewed it. So if you didn't listen to that review, please go back and listen to that before we get into that discussion. And then our discussion topic for today is we're going to talk a little bit about how we review games, what we look at, what we like, what we don't like, things like that. A couple news stories, and our list for the day is the SNES titles, so our favorite Super Nintendo games. Who we are is that we are just three guys who have full-time jobs, families, and other hobbies who just love to game. What makes this podcast different is that we will, of course, talk about new games, but we will also talk about games that came out 2 or 3 years ago as if they were new. We just want to share our experiences playing these games in case you're in the same spot as us where your gaming time is limited. Please download the podcast by Apple app, Stitcher, Google Play for all you Android users, or go on iTunes and hit that subscribe button. That way you get our weekly episodes uploaded to you every Thursday. If you have questions, discussion topics, or list ideas, please message us on Facebook, send us an email, thelandpartners@gmail.com, or just leave a comment. Check out our LAN Partner Twitch page. We've been uploading some weekly videos up there. So please check that out. Last week, I left us off with your favorite simulation sport games, and I told everyone to leave a comment on that. We did have a response on YouTube. A user named White Mamba, maybe Brian Scalabrini, maybe he's listening to LAN Partners Podcast. He was the White Mamba. He responded with his number 3 game was NBA 2K Series. His number 2 was Tiger Woods. Then he had an RIP next to it. Tiger Woods was a great golf game. You gotta admit. I don't know.
It was good.
I don't know if Dave, were you into Tiger Woods? I don't see you as a Tiger Woods guy.
I know a lot of people were into Tiger Woods.
They were good. What's the replacement now? Rory McIlroy, and it's like terrible.
Yeah.
So
I heard Tiger Woods was also into a lot of people. That's another topic, though.
Oh, too soon. And our number 1 is here's number 1. White Mama's number 1 was the NHL series. No surprise there. NHL is like the sports game of the year almost. Besides that and FIFA, I mean, they're always competing.
Yeah.
So, thank you, White Mamba, for whoever you are. Maybe Brian Scalabrini. Yes. We'd love to see you back in Chicago. So let's go ahead and get started with our episode 13. Matt, tell us about the free games this month that PS4 subscribers and Xbox One subscribers can see available to them.
It would be my pleasure. So for PlayStation Plus for the month of August, for PlayStation 4 users, they are looking at Assassin's Creed Freedom Cry. Don't need to say anything else about that. It's an Assassin's Creed game. If you haven't played one before, they're all the basic same premise. There's a game called Downwell, which is for the PS4 and actually for the Vita, which is a down-scrolling shooter. So you're kind of free-falling onto platforms and a shooter at the same time. Then the other big one is Just Cause 3. That's just a huge open sandbox world. There is a story and campaign, but it's built on destruction and kind of creativity within that sandbox world. Then for PS3 users, they're still doing free games for PS3. It's called Snake Ball. It's basically a 3D version of Snake. You know, when you eat the apple and your snake gets longer and you got to keep getting longer. And then Super Motherload, which is for PS3. That's basically a 2D digging game where you're digging through the ground trying to get minerals and resources. Didn't look too interesting. And then Level 22, which is for the Vita. It's a workplace stealth game. So your guy is late to work, not trying to get fired. So you have to sneak up to floor 22 where his cubicle is without getting detected. And the games for Xbox Games with Gold for August, you're looking at Slime Rancher, which is basically it's a first-person game. You're this person on another planet, and you're trying to grow and breed slime. There's a lot more to it, obviously, but that's the quick description. And then Trials Fusion, you're on a dirt bike. You got to do all these tricks to get through the level, make all these crazy gaps, and do things like that. That one's pretty fun. And then one of the big ones, it's on Xbox 360, but Xbox One owners can still play it. Bayonetta, which me and Connor have talked about a little bit. Connor's very excited about that one. Dave sent us a text. He installed it. He's going to be checking that out. And then the other one, which is Xbox 360 game, also playable on the Xbox One, is Red Faction Armageddon.
All right, so be on the lookout for that. I'm a little curious about that level 22. That's a little interesting to me. So let's go ahead and jump into our couple reviews for the day. Like I said, retro review. I played StarTropics. That was on the NES Classic. You can access it on your Wii U console, Nintendo eShop, or the 3DS eShop. Then once Switch finally gets an eShop, they don't have an eShop, right? They're still...
They do. It's just not very well put together at this point.
It's not as fleshed out yet.
Okay.
They don't have Virtual Console. They do have an eShop.
Right. So once they get Virtual Console, probably be available on there if you're looking into it. But it's developed by Nintendo, released in December of 1990. It took me 6 hours to play on my NES Classic, but if you know anything about the NES Classic, that you could save whenever you want. So what I did is I literally saved every time I killed like a big group of enemies, or every time I entered a room. So if I died, I didn't have to go all the way back to the beginning of the dungeon. So that probably cut off, I'd easily say, an hour or two, depending on the checkpoint. I mean, those NES games are not very forgiving in checkpoints. First off, wow, what a game! I'm really glad that the NES Classic was providing this game. I think this game was extremely lost in the shadow of Zelda back in the late 80s, early 90s, that I don't think people appreciated as much then. So basically you play the game as a guy named Mike, and you're trying to find your uncle on this island. Your weapon you start off with is a yo-yo, so you're just going around these different places, like dungeons, very Zelda-like. It definitely takes from Zelda. You could see the comparisons. I would say it's almost identical, just a different skin and a couple different twerks to it, but it's really fun. The things I liked about it was the narrative of the game. For an NES game, I did not expect any sort of story to drive this game along, but wow, was I surprised. This story was awesome. If this game was like a current day Zelda, you know how like the Breath of the Wild just came out, all those Zelda games come out. If they did a StarTropics today with today's graphics, today's gameplay, with a Zelda style, and they used this storyline from the original StarTropics, it would be really good. Because throughout the game you go from like tropical settings where you're in islands, and then by the end of the game you're in a spaceship fighting aliens, and you have a submarine to travel from places to place, and you can submerge, go underwater. It's really cool. I would love to see this thing come back as an updated game. There's got to be some people out there trying to get a Kickstarter going or something like that. So the narrative was awesome. Weapon upgrading was cool. Throughout the game, you'd find new weapons, so that was fun. A couple things I didn't like about the game is after you completed a dungeon, there was your health, whatever your health was when you finished the dungeon. So let's say you finish a boss, half a heart left, you still keep that half heart rather than your health just completely refilling. And it got very annoying at a point, because if I didn't have the NES Classic, I'd be like, I need more health because I'm going to get sent back all the way to the back. Dave, real quick, do you remember in Legend of Zelda, after you completed a dungeon, if your health refilled?
I do believe it did.
Yeah, I thought so too.
If I say so. I mean, it had to have. I believe it does.
That was the only thing I remember, because I was doing a lot of comparisons of Legend of Zelda to StarTropics because they are so similar, and I noticed that a lot, that I remember Zelda giving you the health back, which makes it a little bit more forgiving. They're very much like Zelda. There are easy ways to get extremely lost. Like in the Lost Woods in Zelda, you have to go a certain pattern. There's things similar to that in StarTropics. The puzzles are very neat. A lot of fun. Definitely takes some thinking. Definitely takes some Googling and looking up walkthroughs if you don't have the patience to try to figure it out. But they are pretty tough. So overall, really great game. I think it was stuck in this shadow of Zelda all its life. I don't think people appreciated it much at that time because they felt like it was just a cheap knockoff, maybe. I don't know. I was only 1 year old when this game came out, so I can't speak from that. You know, Dave was in his mid-30s, so maybe he can speak.
Dave was getting through high school.
Yeah, we were definitely playing that in the old dorm room, so.
So, I thought it was awesome. I would love to see a current day StarTropics. There was a sequel on the very, very tail end of the NES. I might check that out on the virtual shop or whatever it's called on Nintendo. I might check that out, but I probably won't because it doesn't have that save feature that the NES Classic features. So 8 out of 10. Really glad I played it. If you have access to it, I would definitely recommend it. So moving on to some Snipperclips on the Switch. Tell us about this game.
All right, so Snipperclips was developed by SFB Games Limited, formerly known as Super Flash Brothers, which is kind of funny, and published by Nintendo. It's $20 on the Switch eShop. Came out March 3rd, which is the launch day of the Switch. And Snipperclips is a puzzle strategy game that challenges the player in some really creative and innovative ways. You control a piece of paper shaped like a thimble as your character. Your paper character has the ability to overlap other characters and snip pieces off of them to change their shape, and other characters have the ability to do this to you as well. The goal is to change your shape in such a way that it helps you solve puzzles that pre-exist in the form of different stages. You can play this game solo by switching between characters, or you can play with up to 3 other friends on the same screen at the same time. There's a sort of story mode kind of that you can use, that you can play to unlock different challenges and worlds, but it's very, very short, and it's possible to see everything this game has to offer in 5 hours or less. Depending on how clever you are, if there's a couple that you get stuck on, I got stuck on a couple. It could take a little bit longer, or you could just fly through it. Depending on how many people are playing, that could also help, because I know that the more people we had playing the different challenges, the more minds were trying to figure out the puzzles, and we got them done a little bit faster. Then there's the multiplayer, which acts kind of like as a competitive mode, and you can either compete against one another to solve puzzles, similar to the story mode, or you could play completely separate little mini games. And Connor was over one time when we were playing the mini games. There's a basketball mini game. There's a little battle mode mini game. There's a bunch of little mini games that what would you say? It kept us busy for maybe like 30 minutes total. All the mini games combined.
Absolute max 30 minutes.
And probably like absolute max. So I think the price of $20 is extremely fair, but it might even be better suited at $15 based on how long the game takes to beat.
I wouldn't pay more than 15 or 20.
Yeah, 15, 20, this is about the sweet spot. They did a good thing there. I'm glad they didn't charge full price for this one. The length is really disappointing, and I don't see how anyone could put more than 8 hours, all-inclusive, into this game without getting bored. The pros about this game, I thought it was really innovative and interesting. Gameplay mechanics, I think that the developers did a really great job coming up with something unique that I had never done before. It's a fun party game for the first couple times you play it. Like Connor and I said, after about a half hour, you and everyone else are just going to start staring at each other like, all right, we could do the basketball game again.
Can I just interject for 1 second while you're talking about the party mode?
Sure.
Here's, without the party mode, if I'm playing Snipperclips, I don't want to play it at all. I would rather look for parking at the Sox-Cubs game than play Snipperclips without that party mode. It is. I did not enjoy it, but the party mode was fun.
I disagree. I think in my opinion, the party mode is the weakest part of the game. It only gives you about a half hour worth of content, whereas I spent easily 3.5, 4 hours minimum doing like the different challenges. My father came over when I got the Switch and we played a little bit. So that was my last pro, is that it's really, really accessible despite age or experience. If my dad can play it with me and be successful, then I'm pretty sure a lot of people can, because he doesn't play video games or computer games or anything at all. Cons. Again, the game is very, very, very short. And once you've seen everything, there's really no reason to go back and play it again. Very low replay value. The multiplayer and mini games get tiresome really, really quickly, like we kind of touched on 3 or 4 times already. And I was a little bit disappointed that with all these nifty features, like shaking the Joy-Con to see how many ice cubes are in there, all these little nifty features that the Joy-Con have, they weren't really implemented much. I could have played that game on a standard controller, on an Xbox controller or PS4 controller. You don't need Joy-Con to play that game. So I gave it a 5 out of 10 average rating, and I think that I would recommend this only to a niche audience that doesn't mind a nice, slow-paced puzzle game.
Quick question: when you're talking about replay value, can you go back and get higher scores on the levels? Like if someone were into that, like get a 3-star out of 4 stars or something like that?
Yeah, so the puzzles, depending on how accurately you change your shape to fit the puzzle shape, it actually does have a rating system. And I had no incentive to get the highest rating on each one, but I'm sure somebody who, this game is for somebody. Somebody's going to fall in love with this game and tell me I'm foolish for giving it a 5 out of 10 because it's so creative. But I only was able to withstand so much, and I was totally content getting just above average on all the different puzzles and not trying to be an artiste.
I don't know.
It sounds like it was kind of one of those, you know how Nintendo always, when the new
Like
systems come out, it's one of those games just to show off kind of what they can do. And
Mario
But see,
Paint.
that's like the weird thing, because this game, like I said, it doesn't really show off anything. I could have played this on Xbox if it came out for Xbox. I mean, does it show off that they have a developer that's called Super Flash Brothers instead of Smash Brothers? I don't know.
I mean, all it is basically you're just putting a tracer over a piece of paper and you hit X or whatever, and then it cuts it out. I mean, there's nothing. Yeah, well, I mean, I agree with Dave that it's nothing pushing the envelopes of the Switch. No,
it is not pushing the Switch. No, it's not pushing the.
I just thought with the whole Ice Cube thing, and they're trying to like show off a little bit about what it can do. Or
well, that's a whole different game though. That's one Switch.
Okay.
Yeah.
Snipperclips. If you shake the controller around, you will see no feedback on the screen.
Okay, I missed that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I wish they would have done something. I'm saying that it has the capability to make you feel separate ice cubes, yet we don't get anything here. I mean, you could play with an NES Classic controller.
Yeah.
Theoretically.
That's all it seems, is just moving around and hitting the buttons. So yeah, so that's Snipperclips. Seems like the LAN partners are not extremely impressed, but it could be for someone special out there. So let's move on to Nier Automata for the PS4. Like I said, I already reviewed this game on the LAN Partners Podcast a couple episodes ago, so please go and check that out real fast before you move on into the rest of this episode while Matt and I talk about it. We're not going to get any spoilers, so don't worry about that. I just want to hear what Matt has to say. So, Matt, tell us briefly, what was your overall take from this game? You don't have to go through likes and dislikes, but just what was your overall? How did you feel playing this game?
So I had I don't want to say a much different experience than you, but I know you really loved the game and really enjoyed it. And it, as we've said before, it's definitely a game that's in your wheelhouse.
Matt, I gave it a 9 out of 10 for listeners who are too lazy to go back and listen to my review. So 9 out of 10.
9 out of 10. I gave it a 7 out of 10, so I'm not terribly far off. That's considered good in our rating system that we're going to get into in a little bit. And I enjoy the game in terms of the combat and the gameplay, and the story was interesting. The characters were interesting. They were likable. The boss fights were really cool, really epic feeling to a lot of those bigger fights. But the thing that really got me, that Connor got to hear me almost whine about on a nightly basis when I was playing, was it's no spoiler, it's no secret. Connor talked about it before too. You have to go through the same playthrough again with a different character, and it's the entire same playthrough that you just played on the first character that you play as, except now you're from a different perspective. But the thing about it was that this character was along with that first character, so everything you do the second time around is pretty much the same. There is some differences, but it's pretty much the same. And it takes about, if you're cruising through it like I was, it takes about 7 to 8 hours on the second playthrough of basically doing everything you just did again. So that really, really got to me. I did not enjoy that at all. I had to really fight through and fight past that, and that's something I complained to Connor about every single time that I was playing the game, because I just couldn't fathom why they were trying to make me do this, because I feel like what they could have done is just really condensed down everything that you did, and maybe had you kind of do spots to remind you, like, okay, yeah, I'm doing this now. Oh, I remember this. We're going through this again now. But no, you literally had to do every single movement that you did the first time.
And to make this a little clearer, it's literally, like, when he says literally, it is. For example, when you first start the game, you have to go through all, like, there's a character walking you through, like, hey, hit this button to define the settings, and hit this button to turn that setting on. That's being recorded, so at the beginning of your second playthrough, they go back and show you what you were doing. So what happened to me was my game got messed up because I got it before this update came out. So all of my menus were in this crazy, wasn't any language, it was just symbols, like, and all
code.
these code, and I had no idea what I was doing. So I sat there for a good 10 minutes, like, Googling what is going on with my game. So when I went back to my second playthrough, I had to sit there for 10 minutes and watch my screen while I'm like, okay, back when I was playing this, I was sitting there on my phone Googling what was going on with this game. So you literally have to sit there and watch whatever you did. So yeah, Matt, sorry, continue with...
No, it's okay. Yeah, it hurt me deep down in my soul, because I liked the game. I think if they would have condensed that down somehow, I would have bumped the game up to an 8 probably, because that just really hurt it for me. And then just little other things, kind of the back and forth with some quests, where you're go deliver this can to this person. Okay, now give this back to the same person you were just with. Okay, now bring this back to them. And that was really annoying. And that goes into my other thing that really bothered me was the layout of the world. Good God, this was like, it felt like I was playing a PS2 game in terms of the layout of this world. They made it so there was purposefully only certain paths that you could follow in order to get somewhere that you wanted to go. So in your head, you're like, hey, I'll just run right through this door that's open right here. Nope, they put an invisible wall there, so you can't do that. So you have to go all the way around, go through all this other stuff, jump around on some tree branches or whatever's in your way, and then finally get to your destination. So towards the end of the game, I was definitely very tired of trying to figure out a way to get somewhere where I knew I could have gotten there so much easier. I just didn't see the point in that. I didn't know why they decided to just make it frustrating. It didn't have anything to do with the game, really. But yeah, that was heartbreaking.
So here's my question for you then. Since this game was a open world game, do you think that they would have been better off without the open world at all? That they just make it a linear experience? Because I sure do. I
absolutely.
I thought the open world was a buzzword for the week. Everyone's doing open world. Horizon Zero Dawn, Breath of the Wild. Everyone, we have to have an open world, so let's do it. And it's just not good. The open world aspect of it is fetch quests to the T. If you look up in the dictionary, there's probably a picture of the main protagonist in this game, just because they went on so many fetch quests. Like, it's just ridiculous.
And there's not even that much stuff in the world, Like when you're running around, it's just pretty empty. Like there's kind of random enemy encounters and stuff like that. But you can skip all those. You can run right past them. So it just didn't feel like necessary at all for them to have that open space.
Completely opposite of what you guys were saying about Yakuza, where you are required to stop.
Right. Yeah, right.
Yeah, there were some things to the open world part that I liked, but not. I felt like it would have been a better experience with the just more, not necessarily just a linear like Bayonetta experience, but just funnel it a little bit better. Like you're saying with the invisible walls, it's like they didn't know how to direct the player where they want you to go.
Right.
Like I want them to get to that point, but they could take a lot of different routes. So let's force them by making invisible barriers, and it could have been a lot better. But what did you think about the story? Before you go into that, for one, I loved the story. Like the story, I was hooked on it. I thought it was extremely compelling. It was really well written. I loved it. I was from the beginning to the end. I was like, what's going to happen with these characters? Yeah. I don't think you felt the same. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your...
I didn't love it. That's for sure. I liked it. I think that's kind of what kept me going a little bit was, okay, because I finally got past that second playthrough, and I know you had told me, because I got to the point where I was like, Connor, just tell me, is it going to change at some point? Will I learn new things? And you were like, yes, it will come. So that kept me going, knowing that something new was on the horizon. So I got through that second playthrough, and then what they consider the third playthrough, you're with a completely new character. So it does open things up a lot, and that it was more interesting to me. It was not interesting enough for me to think it was worth it to go through that second playthrough all over again. Not at all. Like looking back on it, I still was saying that was not worth the extra 8 hours of time they just maybe go through with the second playthrough. So for me, it wasn't as interesting to keep me going. I went through just to finish it. I did like the game, but the story kind of fell flat for me, like going through that second playthrough. And then the third by the time I got to the third playthrough, I was so kind of frustrated and fed up with playing through the second time that I was like, okay, let's just finish this game.
Yeah, I don't think you gave it the love that it was displaying. For example, like when you were playing that one night, and I don't want to give any spoilers, so I'm like, oh, what's the status of this one character? And you're like, oh, da-da-da just happened. I'm like, so? And you're like, what, am I supposed to care? I'm like, that was jaw-dropping. Like, my jaw literally dropped, and you're like, oh, okay. And then, like, you were mocking me for the rest of the night, like, everything happened. Was that jaw-dropping? And, like, you just, I think the second playthrough ruined it for you.
Me out. It bummed me out. I wasn't as invested.
Good.
I was not invested at that point because you said you were like did this happen? And I said, yeah, that happened. And you're like, why didn't you say anything? And I was like, I don't know. It was whatever. I don't know.
I thought, moments like that moment I was talking about and other later parts of the story, like I've said in my review, it was really good, and I had a lot of fun playing it. And so, Matt, you gave it a 7, you said? 7 out of 10?
Yeah, and let me put this in perspective, too. So we pretty religiously, I think, me and Connor, I think Dave checks on it every once in a while, too. We like to look on the website how long to beat, to check how long this game is going to take for us to complete, usually, because it gives you kind of an average based on user inputs.
It's pretty accurate.
So, yeah, it is usually very accurate. So Nier, I think, was sitting around 24 hours if you rushed through the game, basically saying you just ran from next main objective to next main objective, which is pretty much what I did. I ended up finishing the game around 21 hours, so I was 3 hours faster than the average person saying that they rushed through it. And I think, Connor, you were over 30 hours easily, right?
I was at 31. I tried the side quest out. I investigated areas, there were some puzzles around the area that you can, like, once you change characters, you could try to solve these puzzles. So I was doing a lot of that, so that's why I got the additional 10 hours of gameplay out of this.
I'll put that in perspective.
Just like the Yakuza thing. You spent, like, half the time I spent.
Right.
I was doing all the extra stuff, just trying to, get the full experience. So overall, I thought it was a 9. Matt thought it was a 7. So based on what we say, take our opinions for what they are, and hopefully one of us will skew you into either buying this game or not buying this game based on what we said. So hopefully you enjoyed our review. Let's go into our discussion about how we review games. So Dave, how about you lead us off with how we review games?
Well, I think it's before we talk about how we review games, it's really important to acknowledge how difficult the task is to review games. And if you've ever tried to do this at home as a listener to talk about what you would rate a game, you know that video games are insanely hard to review and rate because they're far more complex than any other medium that we receive entertainment through. Movies and TV shows are much easier to rate because they're not interactive or in a dynamic form of entertainment. Video games, when being developed, have to worry about a plethora of factors that will affect the overall enjoyability, like control scheme, responsiveness, movement, compatibility with hardware, and then the kicker, the human factor. A movie doesn't have to worry about somebody exploring their world in real time. Imagine if a movie director had to give control of an actor to some outside force that unpredictably moved the actor around and interacted with the set. That director would have to make an exhausting list of boundaries and rules that predict the possible actions of that said force. This is what video game developers are tasked with doing, giving us freedom of choice while still developing an experience on par with the scripted masterpiece like a movie. So as reviewers, we need to interact with games as a medium in a way that's unlike any other form of entertainment. So my question to you guys, I'll let you take over here. Now that we have the reason why this is an important discussion, whoever wants to take it away, how do you do it personally?
So basically, we're not experts or anything like that. We're just, a couple guys, like I said at the beginning, just playing games. We work full time, and we really just want to give you, the listeners, our best opinions on these games. So it kind of comes down to this rating scale. And what I look for, my number one thing after I play a game, what I look for is the emotional attachment to it. The X factor of it. Was I attached to this game? Is there something memorable about this game that... For example, I just finished Wolfenstein this morning, and there was an emotional attachment to that game where, I felt something special with it, so I would probably rate it higher than if I was just like, didn't really feel anything at all. So, Matt, how do you feel about that?
I agree with you to a big extent. I think I always talk about just my pure kind of enjoyment of the game. A lot of times for me, sometimes it doesn't even matter so much as to if a mechanic worked perfectly or not. It kind of determines like, man, I just really had a great time. Like it kind of goes back. I know me, Connor and Dave, maybe someday we'll get into this, not right now, but GTA is a hot topic between us and Dave. So I think
hot.
I'm not afraid to admit, I love GTA. So I'm not afraid to admit that there are some mechanics to GTA that just are definitely not as well done as other games that do the same thing. So, but it's just an enjoyment factor, an experience of that game that draws me to it and makes me rate that like a 10 instead of something else that maybe does shooting a little bit better, but gets rated lower. It just comes down to me, like Connor said, that factor, the emotional response, emotional attachment, and then just the overall enjoyment of a game is usually what I look for.
And to your point, it's not like you guys, when we have those discussions, nobody is saying I gave GTA a 10, so it is the perfect example of how to do everything right.
Right.
Very much to your point, I acknowledge probably to the same extent that it does a lot of things, very above average, and a lot of things very average, but that it's look how far you can swing the rating of a game based on what kind of a connection you make to it. I have no connection to GTA. The story doesn't grip me at all. The characters, I think, are goofy. They're not even worth being called parodies. I do not like the game. It's not something that I want to spend time doing. But I do acknowledge that the shooting isn't the worst I've done in a game. The driving isn't the worst I've done in a game. It does a lot of things, an insane amount of things at a very average level, in my opinion. So look at the difference between our scores in that, and I'm sure we'll talk about it again in the future. We could get more specific, but we have a very, very wide gap in our scores of what we think about GTA, and a lot of it is, that connection. That's exactly what I was going to say is pretty much the same thing these guys said. My personal connection to a game after I'm done playing it, if I'm sitting there thinking I wish that went on for another 10 hours, I very clearly enjoyed that game. And I've enjoyed some pretty broken games that by other people's standards and wanted them to keep continuing. So,
and along with that, another thing I look for, comparing, all right, so a big topic is a game like Witcher 3. Everyone gives that game's 10s, and then another game, let's say Bayonetta. I gave Bayonetta, I'll get into that review another time, but I gave that game a 10, okay? Witcher 3 and Bayonetta are very, very different games. But if I were to play Witcher 3, I'd probably give it close to a 10. Bayonetta, I gave a 10 because what I look for is, what are the game makers, what are the developers trying to do? Are they doing their goal accurately? Are they doing it right? Are we enjoying what they're trying to get done? You know what I mean? Where, if a game like Bayonetta, they're not trying to give you RPG. They're not trying to give you an open world. They're trying to give you a linear experience, action-packed, pretty decent story. Am I entertained? Yes. Am I having an awesome time? Yes. Am I attached to this character? Yes.
Right.
What else is there? I'm not going to critique that game because, it was good, but, Witcher has all those cool RPG elements and that whole open world that you can investigate. So how is that a 10 and this is a 10 also? Those are two completely different games. Well, they're trying to accomplish two completely different things. So,
exactly.
Where do you guys stand on that argument where, a game like Super Mario World is a 10 and Breath of the Wild is also a 10? How do you guys feel?
I think it's the same thing like we just said. It comes down to what they were trying to do, how well they executed it, how much you enjoyed it. And someone could play Geometry Wars, which is, essentially an arcade game. I don't want to offend anyone who loves Geometry Wars, but it's not, it's not the most in-depth game. It's not going to give you some crazy story like Witcher or Zelda would. It's not gonna, it's just more beat the high score, get to the next level kind of thing, and that can be just as enjoyable to someone as Witcher 3 or Bayonetta is to us. So I think it just comes down to everyone's opinion. And I think just going off of that is I feel like doing this podcast, speaking for myself, I won't speak for you guys, but I think you might agree with me. A good message to people is that we've all had that same problem of reading a review and we're on the fence and we're I don't know if I can deal with the camera issues that they're talking about or this or that. But then it comes down to then we end up playing it and we end up loving it. And it's it's not as bad as they made it seem, or I can deal with that, that kind of thing. And I think a message to people is, if you find yourself remotely interested in something, you're looking for a game to play, just go for it. Don't worry about what other people are complaining about, because to them, something that's really small to you might be huge to them, and then it causes problems. So I think really just go for what you're looking for, that you're interested in.
Yeah, I kind of want to piggyback off of what Connor said. You bring up a lot of good points, but Connor mentioned something about if the game is intending to do something well, it better do it well, because that's when you can tell if a game didn't accomplish their mission. Okay. And what I like to use as an example is some games have intentionally unimpressive graphics, like a Minecraft is not focusing on graphics as their selling point. And I'm not going to knock Minecraft down points because of their graphics. That's not what they're aiming for. That's not when I play Minecraft, I'm not like, ooh, awesome. But like a game that's aiming for photorealism and drops the ball on that, and the characters end up looking real weird and jittery and very strange and robotic when they're supposed to be photorealistic, and they mess up when you know that they were going for photorealism, yeah, it's gonna ruin my immersion a little bit, because you end up feeling how weird and how badly they failed on that. Yeah. So I was reading other people's reviews of, I know Mass Effect Andromeda got a lot of heat for having lifeless, robotic-looking face characters that were trying to go for photorealism. And you see people complaining about that, but those same people would never complain about Minecraft literally having pixels for heads. I mean, it's just one of those things where I think that we, as gamers, especially on this podcast, we're giving you essentially not a rating of a game. When we're giving you guys a rating, it's a rating of our relationship with that game. And if I'm giving a game a low score, you know, I just want the game to know, hey, game, it's not you, it's me. Our relationship just isn't working out.
Are you breaking up with that game?
I'm breaking up with that game. If I quit a game, I wanted to know, like, hey, you did a lot of really great things. It just so happened that I wanted something different. So it's not you, it's me. That's why I gave you a 5 Snipperclips. It's not you, it's me.
No, it's Snipperclips. Don't.
Connor can confirm it's Snipperclips. No, I see what you're saying. That makes total sense.
Yeah, and it just comes down to that experience. For me personally, like I don't really care about graphics. It's not something that I'll look at a game and like, these graphics are subpar, and that's down to a 7 at least. I'm not like that. Right. I look at it open. So yeah, that's kind of how we look at reviews. If you have any questions or anything, please reach out to the LAN Partners. We'd be more than happy to go a little bit more detail on that. And just quickly, before we move on to our news, I'm just going to run through our grading scale just so listeners know, like, hey, this is what they mean when they say a 4 or a 6. So starting from the top, 10 we call a must-play / simply stunning. So those are those top-tier games that we just cannot get enough of, something special. 9 is a superb game. 8 is great. 7 is good. 6 is okay. 5 is average. So like Dave said, Snipperclips is average. It's not like it did a whole lot of good things, not a whole lot of bad things, but for what it did did an average job of it. Number 4, below average. Number 3, bad. 2, abysmal. And number 1, unplayable. Hopefully we won't be talking about any of those lower tier games, but I know Dave feels that about Rockstar games is the lower tier category.
Well, Rockstar games, I would say for me, in my connection to them, they hang around the 5. If we're talking about games I really, really dislike, you're getting into Rise and things like that. That's just a straight up terrible game in my opinion. But again, I didn't care about the characters. I thought that even God of War, which I also didn't super like, did a better job at combat, and it's the same style of combat in my opinion. So
yeah. So yep.
I feel like anything that's in a 3 or below range is probably something that we didn't even finish because it was so terrible.
Most likely. I mean, if you could finish a game, it's got to be at least a 5.
Right.
If you have the ability to finish it, it's got to be at least a 5.
You can sit through it. Yeah.
I would say unfinished games as a 5. I would say if I finish a game, I'm probably not rating it lower than a 6 because that means good, and I'm not going to finish a game that's not good. So if I give a game a 5 or less, you know that I probably didn't finish it. And Snipperclips, the only reason I did was, again, it was only 5 hours long. I could have done that in my sleep. So
yeah. All right, so I got one news story for you this week, just because it's a Chicago story, Chicago-based. I meant to talk about this last week, but I kind of forgot. So 2 Saturdays ago was the Pokemon Go Fest. Did you guys see this? Did you hear about this?
Yeah.
So it's funny. Pokemon Go Fest was that Saturday. My wife and I, my wife Lauren, we actually went downtown that day not knowing of the Pokemon Go Fest because I don't play Pokemon Go. So we're driving. We park right by Grant Park, and I see thousands of people in Grant Park. I'm like, what are all those people doing? This isn't a Lala. It's not Taste of Chicago. What's going on? So then we're walking around, and I see just tons and tons and tons of people in Pokemon shirts and have their phones out with the cord come out of their backpack charging their phones. I'm like, what is this? Why is there so many Pokemon people? So then find out that it was the Pokemon Go Fest, and if you're somebody who hasn't kept up with video game news, that fest went awful, terrible, huge failure. The person running the fest or whatever you want to call it went out on stage and people chanted "Fix the game" because the whole game crashed. The whole goal was to bring 20,000 people into Grant Park. People from all over the United States came to this fest in Chicago hoping to play Pokemon Go with 20,000 other people, and they had some legendary Pokemon that they were going to unleash, and everyone can fight for them. And it didn't work. The game broke. Everything was down. It went bad.
They had to ended up refunding everybody.
Yeah, and they gave them 100 something in game credit, like it matters. Like, oh, thank you.
I know.
I don't play Pokemon Go.
I just traveled across country for this. Thank you.
100 of whatever it is does not sound very appetizing to me. I wonder if they're gonna move forward with another Pokemon Go Fest next year.
If they can fix it, it sounds like it'd be really cool for those people who are into that. But yeah, they failed miserably.
Yeah, it did not go very well. So that is our episode 13 of the LAN Partners Podcast. Let's close it off with our Super Nintendo favorite games. So I'll start us off with my number 3, Super Mario World. There is absolutely no explanation needed. Maybe why it wasn't number 1. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess.
It's definitely a top 3. So, Matt, what was your number 3 Super Nintendo game?
My number 3, so I haven't played a whole lot of Super Nintendo games, but I did play a few because I never owned a Super Nintendo, but that's why I want the SNES Classic so bad. My number 3 is Mortal Kombat 2. I used to go over to my buddy Steve's house down the street when I was a kid, and we used to play that all the time.
Wow, Mortal Kombat. I didn't know. Wow. Dave, what is your number 3?
I'm pretty sure in the very first Mortal Kombat, you had to put in a code to see blood and gore and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure it came stock without it. Is that correct? Or maybe it was only the Sega version. Anyway, regardless, my number 3 is Mario Kart for Super Nintendo. It's Connor's number 1. I'm saying it's number 3. It's a good game. It's not on your list?
No.
You crazy man, you. I don't know what you did as a child with your Super Nintendo, but if it wasn't Mario Kart, you wasted your time.
Let's play other games. My number 2 is Zombies Ate My Neighbors.
I knew that was going to be on there.
That is a gem of a game. I talked about that game in my co-op list, so I'm not going to go too much into that, but that game and my number 1 game will have just a absolutely special place in my heart for gaming forever and ever. So, Matt, what is your number 2 SNES game?
My number 2 is Donkey Kong Country. I remember being really interested with the visual style that they took with that game. So unlike Connor, I'm kind of a graphics guy. I'll never let graphics mess with my ratings, but I'm more into the technological aspects. So that one always grabbed my attention. And it's just Donkey Kong, man. It's a fun game.
Yeah, good time. Dave?
Connor, they call your number 2 the original DayZ.
Ooh.
I don't know if you knew that. No. Anyway, my number 2
the version that worked.
The version that worked, yeah. The version that actually has a final release. My number 2 is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time. And it's really funny because earlier today, Connor had sent me a text message that referenced this game. And it creeped me out because it's on my list. And I was like, that's just...
I don't think we've ever once said that game name ever.
I don't think we've even talked about it. But it was a fantastic game. It's my number 2. And I remember the voice of, I think it was Leonardo they had reading all the different things. And it's like, the Big Apple, 3 a.m. I was like, yeah, it is. Let's go. Let's go. Come on, City.
Is it the same one as on Sega?
No,
that was lost. It was something like New York or something. I can't remember.
It was a different game because I remember Power Rangers did that too. They released Power Rangers, but 2 completely different games. Like the Sega one was a fighting game, and the Super Nintendo Power Rangers was like a side scroller.
I have the Power Rangers Sega game.
As do I. It was a great game.
So
Did you know that everybody looks like the Red Ranger just with different colors? You might want to check that out next time you turn it on. Anyway, keep going.
I'm sure they do. My number 1 is Super Bomberman.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought you had that telegraphed from all the way. Super Bomberman has been a game that has not been recreated well at all. This Bomberman 64, terrible. Super Bomberman R on the Switch, never played it, but I have no interest in playing it because I watched enough gameplay to say that swing and a miss again on Super Bomberman. So I don't think there will ever be a replacement for Super Bomberman. Matt, what is your number 1?
My number 1 is Super Mario World. That's the only Super Nintendo game that I've beaten multiple times. I actually just beat it again